Dear students and dear colleagues, the research group AreaS is happy to welcome you at our cathedral, the library at Østfold University College. The coming hour is a seminar organized in cooperation with Ole Vannem, who is running around here at the library. The theme is Resistance, Politics and Radical Theories in International Relations. What we are doing is a very short introduction to two of these chapters in this book, which we have today on the curricula. My name is Rania Maktabi, and I'm an associate professor in political science and member of the AreaS research group, which is led by Frank Urban and Elin Strand Larsen. We have the pleasure to welcome film director Frøydis Fosslie Moe. Frøydis will soon introduce herself and her short film, My Sister's Rose, which is her MA thesis in Screen Academy, Scotland. You finished in 2018, Frøydis, and your presence here as a young female guest lecturer reduces the average age of the other two guest lecturers I have invited this semester by several decades. Jon Fitje at the PSD is 58 years old, and Bernd Hagtvedt is soon to be 75. You are 25? Yeah. Thank you so much for helping me to balance the patriarchal and gender structure. In addition to being a film director, I must add that included in your degree is International Development Studies from the University of Oslo, where you have had fieldworks in Nicaragua, and India, and in England. The hour is constituted as follows. This hour we finish at around 1 o'clock. I start with a short theoretical introduction to radical theories within the study of IR, which is international relations. For today, I've chosen social constructivism as theoretical approach, which perhaps may help us to understand the political context around your short film, Frøydis, My Sister's Rose. Frøydis will then introduce herself, even more than me now, I have done to you, for around 10 minutes, and talk about what you want to touch upon, the film, and then we will screen the film. It is 12 minutes long. We will have a short discussion where I ask you some questions, and then we will open the floor for Q&A. So please, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to remember to put them out when we finish our panel discussion. John Lennon, the British musician, and his song Imagine was released in 1971. This was in the midst of the Vietnam War. Let me remind you that the Vietnam War was an imperial war which started by the France in 1955, and then another imperial power, the USA, took over. It did not end until 1975, with thousands and thousands of dead people. The US was driven out of Vietnam in 1975. It's important to have this context when you listen to this song. John Lennon did what radicals do. Radicalism is believing or expressing the belief that there should be great or extreme social change or political change. The Cambridge Dictionary gives this example, and I quote, "He was known as a radical reformer, thinker, politician." These people have very radical views. John Lennon was radical in his song in that he insisted that you can imagine something else than war. Imagine no hell below us, above us only sky. Imagine there's no countries. It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for. These sound at first glance as idealism. I suggest that this approach is radical in that John Lennon insists that ideas are important political tools. Imagination and conceptions are important political tools because they do not only help us to understand the world. Ideas are important because they can also provide tools to change the world, for good and for bad. In our library seminar today, we shall ponder on both elements, the good and the bad, life and death, idealism, youth and hope, on the one hand, extremism, orthodoxy, and despair on the other hand. There are many strands of radical theories in the study of international relations. Here we ponder on the youngest theoretical tradition or branch called social constructivism. Social constructivism. And now for a very short introduction on social constructivism as theoretical approach. Social constructivists or theories on social constructivism focus on human awareness, human consciousness, bevissthet, and their place in world affairs. Constructivists are often called critical theorists. They reject the one-sided material focus on power, on arms, on economic power. They argue that social reality is not objective. Social reality is constructed by ideas. Constructivists insist that the social world is a world of human consciousness, of thoughts and belief, of ideas and concepts, of languages and signs and signals and understandings among human beings. In general, constructivists argue that we always have to interpret our surroundings in order to understand the world and our reality. Some constructivists argue that we can reshape our reality by changing the way we think about it. This is why imagine. Herein lies the radical approach of constructivist approaches. Although social constructivism did not exist at the time when John Lennon wrote his song in 1971, his radical thoughts about war and peace and international politics could well be understood as constructivist. Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. Imagine there's no countries. It isn't hard to do. Imagine no possessions. I wonder if you can. No need for greed or hunger. A brotherhood of man. Now today, we shall imagine more than the brotherhood of man. We shall also imagine the sisterhood of humankind. Sisterhood of humankind, as understood here as feminist approaches towards politics as Frøydis perceives the political. In her work, Frøydis mixes politics, activism, and ideas. She makes films which can also be understood as comments about gender inequality and politics. The story of My Sister's Rose is set in Norway in mid-July 2011, when Norway experienced its first terror attack. Please note that the background and political context around the film is the terror attack on Utøya on the 22nd of July. Importantly, the short film does not focus on terrorism. It focuses on youth and political participation. And that being said, it is important that if anyone in the audience finds it difficult that the 22nd July terror attack is the theme of the film, so please feel free to reserve yourself from joining us hereafter. I just give that notice. 8 years have passed after the massacre where 77 Norwegians were killed and more than 110 persons were injured. 69 of those who died participated at the youth camp at Utøya. In Østfold, 7 persons died. 6 of them were youth. Of these 7, 6 were youth from Sarpsborg, Rygge, Fredrikstad, and Halden. 5 young women and 1 young man, 6 youth. At the government premises, regjeringskvartalet, 1 woman from Våler died. She was 52. Frøydis has interviewed political representatives from the Norwegian Labour Party's youth branch, called AUF. It was mainly AUF members who were attacked at Utøya. In her film, she uses reflections by youth on politics as they perceived it before the attack. Now, the 22nd July attacks are here in the library, symbolized by the sculpture Iren Roses. I took this picture on Sunday on my way home. I was visiting a friend in Oslo. It's a project entitled Iren Roses, Iren Roses, by the artists Toppe Malm and Tone Mørk after the terror attacks. They took initiative to make them. They invited blacksmiths from all over the world to contribute and forge and form iron roses in commemoration of the sea of roses that were laid outside the Oslo Cathedral in July 2011. So 1,000 roses were hand-made, and they were unveiled last month, in September 2019. Of course, the rose is not only a rose. Of course, the rose is the symbol of the labor movement in Norway, not only in Norway, but also in international relations all over the world. The rose is the symbol of social movements, of social democratic labor parties. It is also a feminist symbol because it symbolizes the Bread and Roses song sung by Massachusetts textile workers in the USA in 1912. And in the March, from January to March 1912, a rose is not a rose. In conclusion, next time, when you hear Imagine by John Lennon, I hope that you remember the power of ideas and that he asks us to envision a world with nothing to kill or die for. I think the most radical theories of all are those which confess non-violence as tool of change. Ironically, these very perspectives who insist on non-violence as a radical idea fall themselves to gunpoint. John Lennon was murdered in New York in December 1980. The terrorist attacks were carried out by a young Norwegian man with very crude, violent ideas about the position of women in society. He was an extremist, anti-feminist, as well as an anti-multiculturalist. He was a killer of ideas of youth and the idea of women's emancipation too. Frøydis, I give the floor to you.
Thank you. Hi guys, thank you for having me. Yes, so my name is Frøydis Fosslie Moe, and I'm from the countryside up north of Norway. Basically, I started with activism at the age of 12, so this is my kind of field. But after being involved in politics for multiple years, I found out that I am not using my visual side because I'm really into photography and film and everything that's like combining colors and textures and all those kind of things. So I decided to go to or apply to an MA course in Edinburgh. So it's called Screen Academy Scotland. At that time, I had a degree in International Development Studies from the University of Oslo, or Oslo Met, University College. And because I felt like when I wrote my thesis in International Development Studies, I wrote it about Duterte in the Philippines. And how he has the war on drugs and how the poorer parts of society are being punished for this war on drugs and not the actual drug lords. That's what I was writing about. And after 3 years of doing my bachelor's degree, I was just like writing these very interesting and passionate reports about all these things that I found really exciting. And I don't know, I felt like someone needed to read them, but at some point I figured out that the only people who read my reports were my professors at the university, and then afterwards they just printed out the thesis I made and just put it in a shelf, and then it kind of just dusted down and no one looked at it ever again. So I was thinking, okay, how can I approach people on their own terms? How can I reach out to people who don't usually are involved in politics? So I thought, okay, how can I do this? Yes, visually. Because everyone in this room watches television series or read books. Yeah? Yeah, you do? Yeah, okay. Yeah, so I thought that would probably be an easier approach to reach out to people. But what I found out when I started at Screen Academy, it was a really long process because it's getting into a school, doing a master's degree in something and not having a bachelor's degree that matches up. It's a very hard process to get in. It's like multiple interviews and all these tests they put you through. But I was very lucky. I was one out of 8 people who were selected. We were 4,000 people trying to get a spot, and I was the only one in my class who got in without a bachelor's degree in film. I guess they saw something in me, which was really nice. And what I found out was that when you're studying film, no one in my course, they don't give a shit about politics. They make films because it's visually pleasing and it gives them something like, they don't actually think about the impact in what kind of films they screen to people. I think with my approach where I combine international development studies and film, I get like my own little activist films going on. And I think I want to implement this with like other filmmakers. So when I make films, I always make sure that everyone who works with me are aware what we're going to make films about, what is my statement, and how do you want to reach out to people with my social activism. You know, I want to change the world through film and politics, basically. Yeah. Did that make any sense to you guys?
A lot of sense.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Frøydis. Shall we screen the film then?
Yep. Let's do it.
Okay, Frøydis, we will give you an applause for being one of 8 who came into the Film Academy and made us this film. Thank you.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've seen it. I haven't seen it since last year, so it was just like, whoa. It felt like a big throwback. Yeah.
I wondered, 2 years ago, or 3, I don't remember, we went to visit the 22nd July Center. We is the political science class. And you told me that you wanted to have the film screened there. Tell us what happened when you asked them to screen the film.
Yeah, so basically the whole point about making this film was because I felt like, because I used to be a part of AreaS, the youth labor organization, and for me it felt like everyone was talking on our behalf. So I felt like I needed to speak up with, because the whole focus about 22nd of July is always about the terrorist attack and not the people who were actually involved in the terrorist attack. So I was just like, when people started making films about us, or us as a group, and not actually portraying us outside of the terrorist attack, it kind of pissed me off. So I made this film to have some kind of counterpart to what everyone was making, you know, like 22nd of July, Paul Greengrass's film and everything. It's always like focused on the attack. So I wanted to do something totally different, and then be the one who portrayed ourselves. But what I soon figured out was that my film was too political for most places.
Bureaucrats? Bureaucrats?
For bureaucrats, yeah. It was just, when I made the film, I just wanted us to speak up as AreaSers. But then people kind of didn't like it when we started speaking up. The louder our voices were, the more pissed off people kind of became.
Who is the people?
The people is 22nd of July and the
Center
and støtte, 22. juli støttegruppa, the support group. It's not that they don't like the film, it's more like they say that my political message is very focused towards the Youth Labour Party, and then they keep on saying that this was an attack that happened to all of Norway, like everyone was affected by this terrorist attack. But from my experience, it wasn't just a random attack. The attack could have happened at a festival, it could have happened at a school, it could have happened at a subway stop or anything like that, or a train station, but it happened on this particular island because it was, we were attacked by a person who hated our values and our ideas and everything we believed in. So it wasn't a random attack, and me saying that it wasn't a random attack should not piss someone off. It's actually fact. But yeah, so far I haven't been able to screen it in any Utøya 22nd of July, any kind of memorial or at the center or anything. They don't want to touch it because it's too political, which is kind of scary.
And you told me something else too,
yeah.
And that was that you have a friend who herself was a survivor from Utøya, and that she has become a performer, an performance artist. Tell us about what she and you wanted to do.
Yeah, okay. So what happened to us on 22nd of July, or I wasn't actually on the island, but all my friends were. I wasn't at the island because I had a summer job, so I couldn't go that year. But yeah, it took us so many years to kind of get over the attack and getting used to a new way of living, because all of our friends are dead, right? So getting used to living without your friends and your family members is very, very hard. And then for me and for Mari, my friend, it just took us like multiple years. It's now been 8 years, and we're still trying to cope with what happened because it's a massive shock. So she was at the island with her sister, and now 8 years later, she wants to express this sorrow that she has been holding inside for 8 years. So she asked the Memorial Center if she could have a performance for 30 minutes outside of the memorial site.
At Oslo Rådhus,
yeah,
which is the Oslo Council in the capital.
Yeah.
Rådhuset I Oslo.
Yeah, there are multiple memorial sites, but this is one of the first one who came up after the attack. So it's basically this big, what do you call it, like a big wall with all of the names of the people who died. That's it. So in front of this wall, she wanted to have these, she's a very like experimental artist, so she wanted to have these objects that she could just hold and give to people and stand there and say some words about how she was feeling on the inside. But the memorial site said no, because they thought it was, again, too political. And that to me is just, is so wrong in every way, because here you have a 23-year-old woman who wants to express her feelings about something terrible that happened to her and her family, and she's not allowed to do it. So now she asked me to film the performance. So now we're going to do a little riot ourselves. So we're going to Youngstorget, which is...
Don't say that, that's secret.
Yeah. It's the kind of where all the protests starts, and like labor parties and stuff, like labor movements usually come together in Oslo. So we're going there, and we're gonna bring banners, and we're gonna wear red, and we're gonna, I'm wearing the color now, and we're gonna, instead of like saying what we're feeling, she's basically gonna shout it out as loud as she can. So it went from this personal the expression of her emotions, and now it's more of a taking things into your own hands.
This was sort of introvert and with permission, and now it's like extrovert without permission.
Yeah, kind of.
Sounds like power is speaking back.
Yeah.
But you also said something about Erik Poppe, and for you others, Erik Poppe is a colleague of yours, or maybe he's much more well known than you.
Yeah.
He's older. Can you tell us about what you think?
Yeah, so Erik Poppe is a film director who made the 22nd of July film. Has anyone here seen it? Yeah? Some of you have seen it. So most of my friends and I, we can't watch it because why would we? It's a film that is made to shock people. I think the shock factor can be good in some cases, but for us it's just a reminder of like watching entertainment about like how our friends died, and especially when I know the island that much, I know exactly the spots where all my friends died. I personally lost 40 of my friends at the island. Keep in mind that being a part of AreaS is not just something you do for, you don't do it just in the weekends or just go to the island. It's a lifestyle. All of your friends, your boyfriends, your best friend, your sister, everyone is a part of the youth organization. So when it's affected like that, it's going to affect your whole reality. And that's why a film like Erik Poppe's film is not representative for us, because it's just, again, he's trying to show a world where we're just represented during the attack. So how my friends were able to like hide and who died and didn't die, it's just, what about their lives beforehand and what about their lives after? That's more important to me, because what happens in that film is that they focus on 1 hour, while these people have actually been living for like, say, 16 years, 20 years. What about those 20 years? I want to hear more about those 20 years and not just that 1 hour where they fought for their lives. It's wrong way of looking at it. So I get a little bit provoked. Yeah, you can probably notice, yeah.
Thank you, Frøydis. I think we have time for any questions you might have, any questions, and Frøydis will be glad to answer, or reflections also is possible. This is such a powerful film in a very idealist way, so please use our time to...
Yes? Hey. If anyone have a question, I can give you a microphone.
I can ask a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Feminism?
Yeah.
How do you convey that in the film?
Feminism. Good question. So I'm obviously a feminist. And what I'm doing when I make films is that I make sure that I have a female protagonist, as in the main character will always be a female. And I try to convey my socialist ideas in the film. For example, by having people with minority backgrounds, by having people from the LGBTQ community. I'm trying to show that being a part of a group like AreaS, there's going to be a lot of people represented. And when it comes to like feminism in general, yeah, so I'm from the film industry, guys. So the Me Too movement started in the film industry because all of these actors were experiencing this sexual harassment stuff. I was actually in England 2 or 3 weeks ago in London. And I was talking to some investors about my films and my ideas and everything, and they told me that if they slept with me, they could invest in my films.
Did they say that to you?
Yeah, that happened this month. So this is what happens in the film industry. Like, we're talking about we need to change things, but it's very obvious because guys would do those kind of things towards you and they wouldn't even try to hide it. It's still such a big part of our community, and especially the film industry. It's insane. So for me, feminism is being defined only by your gender is so wrong in every way, and the fact that people make rom-coms, as in romantic comedies and stuff, if there's
what is rom-com?
Romantic comedies, like films. So it's like say a 60-year-old man who is a film director, he's going to portray a 25-year-old woman's life in New York. Obviously, it's not going to be portrayed in the right way because he's speaking on behalf of a different gender and he doesn't understand how it is to be a woman. So in these kind of films, the women are always like only looking for a guy, and that's their fulfillment in life, is just to get the perfect guy. And that's why it's just so important that women speak up and make their own films and represent themselves. So feminism is just, yeah, it's. I actually got my own tattoo just to show that I'm really trying to change things, at least. Yeah.
And I thought about this third world politics, which actually you entered first into. How does that, or how has that sort of been reflected in your work, in your thinking, in your imagination, in your concepts, and your ideas? How do you address that also in your work?
Yeah. So as I said before, I started in politics at the age of 12. I was very bored in the countryside because basically there were no one to hang out with, and everyone was really into like tractors and football and stuff, and I wasn't into that kind of stuff. So my only solution to get out of this was to become a part of AreaS, because they promised me to go to the island, go to like different kinds of political weekends away in Stavanger and all over Norway. And then it started off as this fun way to get to know other people, but I got really into socialism and the ideology and stuff, and it was very natural for me to then start studying politics. So I started studying international development studies, and then I went to Nicaragua and did field work about sex workers on the border to Honduras. So I talked to these women, and I think it's very easy to sit here in Norway and think that you know a lot about the world, but you actually don't, because how you see the world is from a perspective as a Norwegian, right? So it's only until you leave the country and start talking to people in different countries you're going to realize that everything you thought about a country might not be true. Because who is the people who are teaching you history? People who teach you history are usually white old men, and they're going to portray themselves as the best way possible as they can, right? So for me, going to Nicaragua and then later moving to India was just like a game changer, because everything I thought about India, and especially as a feminist going to India, was just I thought I had to like cover up and be very careful and try to, you know, because there are a lot of bad reputations about India, for example. And when I went there,
for example, rape.
For example, rape. So when I went there, it was totally different from what I expected. So my thought about like making films is that I'm not going to make films about things I don't know. So I make films about things that I've already studied. I made a lot of effort into it. I talk to people, I interview people about the topic before I start making the film, because I don't want to be one of those film directors from a Western country who think that things that I know, or I don't want to portray things the wrong way, basically. I want to make sure I have my facts right and that I don't do like any kind of Western imperialist typical style of portraying India, for example. Yeah.
Is it possible to portray others or sort of Indians if you are not in India or not an Indian? Or do you find that difficult? Is that what you're saying?
Okay, so when it came to like min søster Rosa, one of my classmates, she's from Gambia, and she was just like, "Are you even allowed to have 2 black women as your main characters?" And I said, "Yes, of course." And
allowed by whom?
No, more like cultural appropriation kind of thing.
Oh, okay.
So she asked me, and I was just like, I get what you're saying. Obviously, I don't speak on behalf of people with another ethnicity than myself. But I think that if we're going to start having more minorities on screens and like in films in general, it's not like all the white directors can't have any other ethnicities in their films. That would be the wrong way to go. I think it's more important I would cast people from how well they do in their auditions, and not based on their religion, race, or whatever. Give me a person in, someone with an indigenous background, give me a person in a wheelchair, give me someone who's blind, I don't care, just try to at least include them in the casting process. Give them a chance and equal opportunity as everyone else. Because people just think that as a director, when I ask like casting agencies and stuff, they only hand me a bunch of white guys. And I'm like, I asked you to show me people from Oslo. People from Oslo is like basically everyone. And then just representing only white guys who are the same age and basically look the same, for me, would be the wrong way to go. Yeah, I think about these things.
Now, this is my last question, and it has to do with this individualism, because cinema and, like the thing you said, that you had to compete with so many, hundreds, thousands of persons to be able to be one of 8 at this academy. So I wonder, how do you sort of combine the very individualist approach with what I read or what we see in the film as a very, very collective kind of sharing, unity, solidarity, support? Isn't there a sort of tension between the very individualist kind of work you have and just trying to survive financially after you finish your studies, and then this very strong unity thing? How do you combine that?
Yeah, it's very difficult, because I've noticed so far that it's very hard for me to get a job as a film director, especially when it comes to commercials, because people don't want to hire someone who has a lot of opinions. People do not want to hire a young, very loud woman. So multiple times I've gone to an interview and they asked me, so how can you make a commercial if you have these many different ideologies? And I said, I can easily make a commercial for like Maxbo or Kiwi, like grocery stores and stuff, but I'm not going to make film commercials for like the weapons industry, like Kongsberg Gruppen. I'm not going to make it for like meat industry. I'm not going to support anything that has to do with oil. It's just like these kind of things. I can do a lot of things, but I have to make sure that it's within my political values. I'm not going to overstep. It's not like I've been working 15 years to change the world and then suddenly going to start representing the bad guys. So I'm going to make sure that I kind of combine the two, and at least hopefully find somewhere I can kind of fit in I'm going to an interview tomorrow to like a mental youth organization. So they want to represent, or they work with like mental health issues, and then they also want to do it visually, and that would be that kind of perfect job for me, because then I can represent something that I believe in, but also work visually. So hopefully I will find the perfect job. But it's going to be tricky, and I'm going to be poor for a very long time. So, yeah.
Oh, thank you, Frøydis. Does anyone have any questions? If not, we say thank you so much for coming and joining us at AreaS seminar on resistance politics. You have to resist poverty, you have to resist bad guys. Thank you, Frøydis, for coming to Halden and joining us for this hour. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.